Started. Extreme on the stream. Yeah. All right. Just getting things underway. Going to take a couple of minutes here while we wait for people to file on in. If you are joining me for the first time, or actually, you know what? If you're in the channel right now, I'm going to quickly write a note here, and in the YouTubes, I'm hoping to see all of your lovely faces here. Let's see here. All right, looks like the stream is up. If you're joining me for the first time, I'm Chris Courtney. I am the founder here at New Pragmatic. I would really love it if you would do me a couple of favors. First, let me know how you like this session. Feel free to email me at chris@newpragmatic.com or leave a comment on the actual YouTube video for this stream. Hey, Abraham. Good to see you, Abraham. San Francisco checking in. This is going to be a really, really interesting session, as it is focused on something that I think we don't focus enough on, which is systems thinking, not design systems. That's different. We'll talk about the difference between the two. But systems thinking and how ethics plays a role in that. The other way, I would love to interact with you. I would love it if you'd subscribe to the YouTube channel. We're posting videos here constantly. I don't know if you're here for the first time, you might not be aware of this, but we have a couple of actual themes, playlist, if you will. One's focused on career guidance for designers. The other is focused on really getting you up and running with React and Gatsby.js for our front end course. So those two are up and running, and this week is the kickoff, the beginning of the new UX course. And there is a particular reason why I've decided to alter how I'm teaching UX. And it's because at the end of the day, where you start with UX alters so much about what the next steps that you take. And so often we focus on, and when we're talking about UX, we focus on, okay, are you solving a problem? And if you aren't solving a problem, then it's not really UX. It's like you're kind of playing around, you're doing some hobby design, but you've got to solve a real problem. If it's going to be UX, you're solving a problem for an end user. Well, that's one piece of it. But just solving a problem as if it exists in a vacuum is a very dangerous thing to do. And that's why I've expanded my talk here and my positioning. Hi, Felicia. Good to see you. Glad to see you joining us. I've shifted where I want to start with UX. And ultimately, it comes down to this one thing that I'll come back to over and over again today. In that, the things that you design impact larger systems. And you have to be aware of those systems and what your designs are doing to change those systems. And how can your designs be used to positively impact those systems? And how can your designs be used to abuse and negatively impact those systems? So those are the things that I want to really focus on when we begin talking about systems design. Now, design systems is where we're going to make reusable components, and we're going to set up how a platform integrates with itself. That's all further downstream. I want you thinking about how does this thing that I've created impact the people that use it, the people that those people interact with, things like that. And in that discussion, embedded, when we begin talking about systems, we have to begin talking about ethics. And ethics is something that has become more and more of a hot topic issue, and you'll definitely see why as this discussion goes on. But because our designs impact people, we have to act ethically, because one of the fundamental cores of what we do is not to harm people. And if we're not thinking ethically about the things that we design, if we're just thinking about profit motives and meeting a deadline, and we're not concerned with the people that may be harmed by what we're doing, then we're using what basically is becoming something that impacts more and more people. We're using it in ways that could hurt people. So systems and ethics, they are tied, they are one-to-one, and they are all shifting around this realm of design. And then obviously I had to talk about Edward Snowden. And you'll know why I'm bringing up Edward Snowden in this discussion when we get there. First of all, I'm Chris Courtney. I'm the founder here at New Pragmatic. As I stated just a little bit ago, this is the kickoff of the UX course. Over the next 12 weeks, there will be a different UX topic that I'm going to tackle each week. And all of those videos will be compiled and built up into a playlist for you so that you can come back and visit this YouTube channel at any point in time. So I think I just ran through why I'm barking about systems, ethics, and design. It's because the things that we create impact more and more people as design weeds its way into different areas via the force multiplier of tech. And it begins impacting systems in ways that are sometimes unpredictable. And they're unpredictable because we don't take the time to ask ourselves, how can this system be impacted by something I create? It doesn't seem like the things that I create, certainly they can't alter a system. And a lot of times we don't even understand really what a system is. So I want to back up and just talk about design. And one of the fundamental things, I'm sure you've heard Steve Jobs and a billion other people talk about this, is design is how it works. What it looks like is such a small subset of what modern design really is. And so many people are still trapped in that mental box of design is just a font selection and the colors I'm using and the spacing. That's not where modern design is. Modern design is really how it works. And we need to understand that the things that we create now, because it's how it works impacts systems. And really, when we begin talking about systems, how we alter them is political. Because the decisions we make have intended and unintended impacts on people based on racial, based on gender, based on socioeconomic concerns. Who we cater to and who we serve and who we do not serve shifts along political boundaries. And because of that, I really think that it's important that we realize that these systems that we're altering and moving around and impacting, we have to be acting ethically. We have to be following a code of ethics as we begin moving into this territory. And this is something that a lot of new designers, they're coming. If you're new to this, you're coming into this, and you likely do not have a concept of design that is carrying you down a path that says, wow, the things I'm creating impact the system. And a lot of times you're thinking the things I'm creating are going to help a person, and that's great. If it's helping one person, it very likely is not helping another person. you need to make sure that those things are ethically covered ethically. You don't want to discriminate. It's one thing if somebody doesn't use your product and another person gains a benefit because they're using your product. It's another thing if you have excluded somebody from using your product because they don't have X, Y, or Z, and that then gives an unfair advantage to another person. That would be designing without ethics in mind. So with that concern met and talked about, let's back up and really discuss what a system is, because this is a part that a lot of people struggle with. And for our grounding of systems, we're going to be following the path that Donella Meadows mowed for us years ago. She released a book back in the early 90s, and actually she didn't release the book. She never finished the book. Unfortunately, Donella Meadows passed away years ago, and this book was later released because the people that had her manuscripts realized, wow, this is pretty complete. Why don't we release this? And one of her quotes is here: "A drive for limitless economic growth could eventually disrupt many local, regional, and global systems." If that doesn't sound like a call against against rapid expansion and growth and a worry for global warming, I don't know what does. You can read more about that right here. Now, Meadows breaks down the concept of systems into three basic elements. There are stocks, there are flows, and then there's feedback. And these feedback loops, there's two types of feedback loops. One of them is a regulating loop, and another is a runaway loop. A regulating loop would be one that, if you think about the population dies. Everybody dies at some point. That would be the death end of the population curve would be the regulating loop that brings everything out of exponential growth. A runaway loop would be like people are constantly born. Okay, there is no shortage of births, and as time, the strength of that loop versus the strength of the regulating loop, those impact the overall population. And in that case, the population is the stock. So that's just a very basic breakdown. Live stream offline. That's really weird. I've got the live stream right here, Felicia. I'm gonna chat here with Felicia for just 1 second. Okay, it looks like Abraham's got us. Felicia, I would suggest maybe refreshing because I've got... Hey, thank you, Matal. Good to see you as well. Okay, awesome. I'm glad to see that's back. But it is good to use the chat. I appreciate the heads up. So really quickly, back to what we were discussing with stocks, flows, and feedback. The feedback loops regulate and grow the stock, and the flows are things that go into the stock and things that go out. So for a really quick diagram here, this is a diagram with two flows, and this basically is representing a two-sided economy. The economy is here in the middle, and then the outflow is probably like the revenue generated from that economy. So you could say this is like Etsy. Etsy's here in the middle. I have sellers of goods. I have buyers of goods, and then that generates money for people. So this is basically the two-side economy. I want to apply that to something that most people are familiar with. I would ask for a show of hands, but I'm going to guess that pretty much everybody on this feed, particularly if you're in the United States, you know what Uber is. Uber has a two-sided economy. You have drivers who want to make money. You have customers who are wanting rides. That's generating the demand. They meet together in the middle at Uber, and then revenue is generated every time those two sides meet. Now, these are fluctuating loops. A fluctuating loop is a type of regulating loop. These things are not runaway. They don't go up forever, but they are fluctuating. And dependent on the fluctuation, some good and bad things can happen. Now let's talk about what happens when you've got a lot of drivers. So for Uber, the issue is you have a lot of drivers, you have a lot of capacity, but you don't have enough demand. And if you remember back when Uber started, Uber was only premium car service, meaning that every ride that you got was like $40 to go a couple of miles in a luxurious black car. Well, now you have things like Pool, UberX, Black, and Select, and that means that more drivers can participate. Riders get the benefit of getting to choose how much they're going to spend for the service, and Uber is extracting more revenue out of that system. This is actually a pretty good system, and it's actually a growth that nets a benefit for the consumer, because previously when Uber started out, it was like $40 a ride. Now you can get downtown for $4. It's almost the same price as like a bus ride. So in many ways, this particular usage of the system has been very beneficial for drivers who want to work, customers who want lower prices, and Uber being able to extract more demand or more revenue out of the capacity that they have. But let's flip this the other way. There are times when demand will operate in a runaway cycle, meaning that there's far more demand than there are drivers able to meet that demand. If you follow the news, you know exactly where this goes. This is where surge pricing or dynamic pricing is introduced. And dynamic pricing on its own isn't bad, but it does raise some critical concerns. In short, though, surge pricing or dynamic pricing increases revenue for Uber because they have more demand than they have drivers. So the cost of every ride just goes up exponentially. As you can see here, New Year's Eve is a big target for the Uber audience. One person here getting hit with a $1,000 fare. I'm not sure how far they had to go to rack that up, but these things can get out of hand, such as this one, a $14,000 20-minute ride. These instances by themselves do not state that surge pricing is unethical. Demand sets the price. I am completely fine with Uber making their jack on New Year's Eve because they have so much demand and they have so much capacity. And it's only smart that they're able to make a lot of money in those instances. However, there are times when we have to ask, what is driving demand? And when it's New Year's Eve, that's clearly one thing. Surge pricing on New Year's Eve is just to be expected. But when it's a terrorist attack, that is when you have created a system that is unethical. You're profiting off of disaster. And I got to be honest with you. This is not completely Uber's fault, because who could have seen this coming? Well, Uber could have seen this coming. Uber could have seen that coming too. The problem here is that we act and feign ignorance when something happens over and over and over again. This is unethical activity occurring over and over again and being blamed, I would suspect, on an algorithm. Oh, the algorithm didn't realize. Oh, the algorithm. These stories are 2014, 2016, 2017. These stories are spanning over years, not weeks or months. So this issue never seems to go away. This is unethical design. And ignorance is not an excuse, particularly in this instance, when we see it happening over and over again. So if systems control how the world works and how people think and the decisions that we make, systems control that. That means that your designs impacting those systems have to be ethically tuned. We have to be thinking with people in mind. We have to be thinking with positive outcomes in mind. Victor Papanek, another book from the catalog, Design for the Real World. Pick it up, Amazon. It's also a very dense read, but one worth it. I would say that if you're choosing between the two, I don't want you to choose between the two. I just want you to go get both. You are responsible for what you put into the world. I can't claim that I got this book just because I'm a genius and Time said it's thoroughly provocative and I thought I should buy it. I bought this book after hearing somebody else talk about it. And by the way, if you're planning out what you're going to do for lunch today or dinner, and you're wondering, well, how can I immediately jump in? I can't get this from the bookstore or from Amazon fast enough. There's a presentation from 1992 where Victor Papanek is basically dressing down the folks at Apple Computer, and somebody was nice enough to upload it to YouTube. I would highly advise taking time to watch that discussion. But also, right in the corner, in the up next area, I love this, says, How Designers Destroyed the World by Mike Monteiro. It is a sign that YouTube is really working well when you have these two authors side by side. Because I actually heard about Victor Papanek from Mike Monteiro's first book, Design as a Job. And Mike's got a new book. It's called Ruined by Design, How Designers Destroyed the World. And he says, we work within a tight, fragile ecosystem where our labor has repercussions. Now, I know Mike really was channeling Victor Papanek, but he also was channeling Donella Meadows. We work within a tight, fragile ecosystem. System. We work in systems. You're responsible for the work that you put into the world. The world, in fact, is a system. A drive for limitless economic growth could eventually disrupt many local, regional, and global systems. This is all about systems. Our entire planet is a system of systems. That's where you live at. Maybe not that particular spot on the planet, but you live on that planet. And we have to realize that populations and economies are systems. And absolutely nothing you create, even if it's something that you never release, the moment you begin creating something, you're thinking about the next thing. Nothing is designed in a vacuum. It will eventually impact some other system. And those systems and how you alter those systems has to be done ethically. The question I have for you, and the ultimate question I want you to walk away from today with, is do I understand how the things that I'm going to create will alter systems? And do I understand how the things that I'm going to create could be abused? Now, this is tough. This is a tough question to figure out because it invites us to lock up. It invites us to not create anything. If I'm being completely honest with you, this is not me telling you to not create anything. This is me asking you to have hard conversations with the people around you. This is me asking you to seek out diverse voices, because as I've seen Mike speaking about this. He talks about, Twitter probably would have figured out a way to block people if it hadn't been created by a room full of white guys. If it had women or people of color in that organization when Twitter was created, they likely would have figured out the blocking feature, because these people have dealt with harassment before. Group of white kids never dealt with the harassment before. Why would they ever think to create those controls? We have to think about how our work could be abused. So let's go back to Uber. Because Uber, unfortunately, is not just about surge pricing. Uber is also about other things. So Uber pricing, we've learned about surge pricing, how that could be exploitive. How else could this system be abused? Well, this is one issue that when I first heard of the next problem, I thought this issue was related to race. I got to be completely honest. The next problem I'm going to talk about is about a group of people being denied service. And when I first read about this, I'm like, oh, okay, this is why you can't get Uber in certain neighborhoods. You can't, the certain neighborhoods are just offline. You pull up Uber and there's no cabs available because those neighborhoods aren't serviced. And actually, that wasn't the case. I'm going to talk about Uber Grayball. And Grayball could be abused the way that I was discussing, but it was actually being abused another way. So we got the dynamic. We got drivers and demand. And basically what Uber Grayball does is it hits against a database. And that database has like phone numbers, credit card numbers, personal ID tags, things of that nature. Anything that anything that would help identify a likely government employee. Now, this isn't like all government employees, and this isn't for the entire United States. This is in particular for places where Uber isn't authorized to operate. So we have this creation of a database by Uber, and it's meant to help them evade local law enforcement, because places like Portland, Oregon haven't authorized Uber to operate, or hadn't at that point in time. So they were trying to avoid coming into contact with government employees. If your phone number or your credit card went through and it didn't ping, and it didn't come up as a possible government employee, you got access to the service. But if your phone number or your credit card number came back and was associated with a possible government employee, your access was denied. And it's interesting just how these repercussions play out, because Uber is now facing a federal inquiry over Grayball. The things that you do are not just unethical, they are possibly illegal. And I don't think that I don't believe that it was somebody at the bottom tier that said, hey, we should come up with a way to avoid authorities. It was somebody higher up in the company, but they needed labor to figure out how to do it. This is a very important quote from Montero's book, by the way. Go get it. I have it. I have the Kindle version. Feigning ignorance that ethics is not part of your job as a designer is no longer valid. The next line is really important. Knowing that ethics is part of your job and ignoring it is criminal. The people that they will figure out who the hell designed and wrote Grayball. They'll figure it out. And those people will probably be thrown under the bus. Montero's book has many, many examples of areas where criminal charges have been pressed against designers. And as you're reading through that book, and I'm sure all of you will read it, you'll probably come to the point where you'll say, hey, a lot of these people, they're not designing, they're not wireframing things. They're engineers, they're developers, they're CEOs, they're not me. They're not me. And I want you to back away from that, because they are designers. You are a designer. And if design is how something works, then somebody had to draw this up, as I referred to it here as a dumpster fire. Jared Spool, the eminent Jared Spool, says it very clearly. Says, anyone who influences the design, anyone who influences what the design becomes is the designer. That's a lot of people. Developers, PMs, corporate legal, all are designers. I've had to file for trademarks. I've had to file for patents before. You have to work with the legal team on that. And when legal says, ooh, shift it this way, you should ask yourself, wait, why are we shifting it that way? Oh, well, that'll help it get passed through faster. Ask those questions. Ask the questions of, is that ethical? Are we skirting the law somehow? Are we being patent trolls? I've had to do that. I've had to ask those questions. I wasn't thinking I was asking them for ethic reasons, to be honest with you. I didn't want to get in trouble. I was trying to make sure I was covering my ass. So I can't claim that I was acting ethically when I asked those questions. I was trying to not get in trouble. And I guess that's kind of a way of acting ethically, but I would hope that I would be higher minded in those situations. So I hope if nothing else comes clear here, I hope that you all realize that you are a designer, and the people that you work with are designers, and the people that are asking you to do things are asking you to design things, and they are designers too. So I want you to act accordingly. Now, you may ask yourself, well, what does accordingly mean, Chris? I'm glad you asked, because that brings us to Edward Snowden. Show of hands, if you don't know who Edward Snowden is, good. I'm glad that you all know who Edward Snowden is. There's a lot of questions about Ed Snowden. Was he a genius? Was he just a low-level contractor? Ultimately, it doesn't matter. For those of you who may be, maybe watching this, maybe you're overseas and you're not completely familiar with Ed Snowden, or heck, you know what? Maybe you're in junior high and you're just getting to this, okay? You're just getting to this. You didn't know anything that happened in 2013. You were busy playing Farmville or whatever. Point is, Snowden worked for the U.S. government for 7 years, largely with the CIA in some capacity. He had access to a lot of top secret information. He leaked a lot of classified information out to the public in 2014. I believe it's 2014. Might have been 2013. 2013, 2014. The information that he leaked out could be seen as detrimental to national security. It could also be seen as beneficial to the public, because we are now aware of a lot of things that the government was doing that they weren't supposed to be doing, and lied under oath to Congress saying that they weren't doing. So ultimately, there are two theories that matter here. When we talk about why Snowden leaked the information, theory number one is that he saw something he ethically didn't agree with, and opted to act. All right? Typically speaking, that is not what I find people doing. I found myself in situations where I saw something happening that seemed kind of shady, and I've walked away. I'm sure everybody who's been a designer long enough has seen something that they weren't directly involved with and went, I don't know. And you kind of walk away because so often you have other battles to fight. And that's what I suspect. I suspect that he could have seen something shady. I know he saw something shady over 7 years in the CIA. I know he did. Why was it 2013, 2014 when he walked away? If it would have been oh my God, I saw something unethical, he would have walked away years ago. Because there's all sorts of unethical things being done under the auspice of national security or under the auspice of presidential privilege or whatever. There's all sorts of things going on. People stay and they stay and they stay and then they don't. Why is it that they walk away at a particular moment? It's theory number 2. Theory number 2 states that he created something that was later used unethical, in an unethical manner. Now, you can talk about what ethics is and isn't inside of a government institution, but as a creator, you can create something that you see as solving a problem and then see it twisted and suddenly being used in an unethical way. I suspect this is the one. I suspect this is the reason why we got the leak. And you can talk all about whether the leak was good, bad, or otherwise. I'm not interested in the impact of the leak. I'm more interested in the why. Okay, why the leak? And I suspect it's because he created something. He made something, he designed something that was then altered. And this goes back to my question. Do you know how the thing that you are building, how the thing you are creating could be abused? How could it be abused? This is the reason why I want you to have those conversations, those hard conversations earlier. I want you to have those hard conversations so that you don't have to turn into the person that leaks. Because if you have those hard conversations, you now have placed the onus on the rest of the team. It's not just you by yourself trying to determine what do we do about this. You're holding the organization accountable. You're asking the hard questions early. Didn't do that here. And that's why we had the tug of responsibility. Essentially, Snowden created Frankenstein. Snowden created some sort of monster, and ultimately that monster got loose. And Snowden himself isn't Frankenstein. If you remember, Frankenstein was named after its creator, Victor Frankenstein. And regardless if you go with old school Victor Frankenstein or new school young Frankenstein, Gene Wilder. Adler is a architect here in Chicago. If you go with old school or new school, ultimately you get back to Snowden. Snowden created a monster, and that monster got loose. So let's look at what that monster was under the guise of a system. So Snowden's monster monitored ISPs, and you have inbound communication to the ISP, Internet Service Provider, for those unfamiliar, and then you have outbound communication from the ISP. The ISP itself is a temporary stock. It's just a place where it's a bundle where things come together and then are redistributed. The ISP itself does not retain information over time. So the way Snowden's monster worked was it said, hey, I've got a court order for surveillance on a particular person. I need you to look for anything related to this person. Well, Snowden's monster. Prism is what it was part of. Prism would go out, they would cast a wide net, and then look for any communications that came through associated with the person that was being targeted. And that's great. It could pick out anything, okay? And they had agreements with all the major tech companies. Apple was in on it, Google was in on it, Facebook, Yahoo, Hotmail, everybody. So all these items that were inbound to the ISP, the NSA could snoop on it and then pick out the communications it needed for the court order. That was how the system was designed, and it worked well. However, at some point, the government said, hey, we have this ability to capture all this communication. Wouldn't it be easier if we just captured it all and went back and looked later? Like, let's just store a copy of everything. So while the ISP has a lot of information passing through it and no copies of it are ever made, now everything that's passing through is captured and stored by the NSA. Nobody has time to look at all of it, per se, but that communication's captured. So rather than only having what is coming through right now, they have a historical record to go back and look at. And this is really just a runaway loop. So this runaway loop, eventually that ISP capture and storage gets bigger and bigger and bigger over time. The amount of information stored is insane. It's uncalculable at this point in time how much information they have. So now they get a court order, and now they have a database to go look for records in. But at any point in time, anybody can actually go into that database. They don't really need a court order for it. They find something, then they go ask for a court order, and then they say, oh, I've got this information. The target of the court order is in there, but so are you. So is your family. So is your friends. Everyone. Everyone's in there. And the government of Brazil got really pissed off about this because they said, wait, Brazilian records that are in your database aren't protected by a court order because we're not United States citizens. That means you can go through the database all you want to about our citizens. That particular angle of it is particularly damning because most people on the planet are not United States citizens. So only a small portion of people that are in that database are actually protected by the court order based on all the communications that have been collected and stored. So the NSA, regardless of how you feel about national security, the NSA was abusing the legal system. Legal system said you needed a court order to begin surveillance, not you can surveil everyone and then go look at it if you have a court order. That's not what the legal system said. Now, the NSA abused the system, yet all we talked about, hi Mylene, yet all we talked about was who leaked. All we were instructed to talk about was who leaked. And this is always governed by the politicians in power. Obama refuses to pardon Edward Snowden. Keep in mind, this was under Obama's watch. Not under Trump or Bush. This was something that happened under Obama's watch. So as much as I like my homeboy Obama, this is a giant mark on his record. But slowly things did happen. The people are still powerless, but they are awake. This is a story in The Guardian 5 years after the leak occurred. 5 years on, Snowden inspired tech giants to change, even if governments wouldn't. I most notably point to Tim Cook and Apple on this particular issue, although Google and Facebook have been rapidly carrying the rear on this issue. The question is, did anything change at all? Because as you'll likely remember, constantly there are leaks. Facebook user records exposed on Amazon cloud server. Facebook and Amazon records floating around, that's most of the internet. Google records being exposed. These user profiles, it might not seem like a big deal, but it's a pretty big deal. It's not quite the NSA capturing your photos, your email, your voice conversations. It's not on that level, but it's still bad. Snowden grabbed our attention because of the scale. When it happened, we were like, holy crap, our governments are doing what? Most of you aren't going to be in a Snowden-like position. But there are Snowdens at every level. I point to Grayball because if somebody asks you to do something unethically, they'll be able to point you out. There's going to be a Snowden in your organization that will at some point people out who acted unethically. So if there's no other reason for you to toe the line and carry yourself in an ethical manner, just remember there's somebody out there who is unhappy about what's happening. Some Uber employees who knew about Grayball, presumably the same ones who leaked it to the New York Times, had qualms about whether it was ethical or legal. This tells me that a conversation happened in Uber. A group of people went to their bosses and said, "This ain't right. You can't do this." Then they did it anyway. And then those people left. And after they left, they then went and told the New York Times. And now there's a federal investigation. And you can guarantee yourself that the people who left aren't going to be the ones that are serving time after this is all said and done. The ultimate question I want you to ask yourself as you're embarking on your design careers: do you want a short-term win? Do you want to make your boss happy and get invited out for drinks? Or do you want to have a career? Do you want to have long-term success? And the way you have long-term success is you act ethically and you're aware of the systems that your designs impact. So I'm going to open it up for questions. There's always a lag on the live stream, so feel free to jump in to the chat. The other thing I will mention is if you do not have a question right now, but you have a question that strikes you later, that is where the Slack channel comes into play. I will try to find Slack. Where is it? There it be. You can see we have a lot of conversation going on over there in Slack. But with that, I'm Chris Courtney. I'm extremely happy to see so many faces, so many signups. It was a great week for the signups. I'm really looking forward to your questions on this topic, and feel free to take over the chat. I will hang out here as long as the conversation goes. And by the way, I might add, there are so many other instances of unethical design that I didn't bring up. I didn't really get into. There was a case about dark patterns. That dark patterns are really anytime you are tricking somebody into signing up for a service, buying something that they didn't put in their cart, asking obscure questions that just to get people to say yes, but it signs them up for something that they didn't intend on signing up. They signed away their privacy rights because they clicked on this button that said okay, but they weren't quite sure what they were what they were okaying. Those dark patterns, and actually I could do an entire session I could do an entire course just on ethics and design. this may be something that we stretch out into, but those dark patterns are something that I definitely want to come back and spend more time with. Got a question from Felicia. If you're part of a team and you're new to that team, how do you bring this up? Felicia, I think that's a great question, because I first of all, I don't think it matters if you're new to the team or you've been there a while. I think you actually may have more to lose if you've been there a while, because at some point it becomes about justifying I'm going to change the system from the inside. It becomes about justifying your existence in that place. It becomes about status quo. I got to maintain where I'm at. I have this is one that will come up quite a bit. I have established a quality of life for myself that I do not want to give up. So I am not sure this is where I want to. I want to die on this hill. That's the statement people will make. Do you want to really die on that hill? When you're new to the team, I think there's frankly less to fear. But when you're new to that team, you're also there is a stress of, I just got this job. I want to establish camaraderie. I think this is often the time where you have an opportunity to shine. Like asking, don't accuse anybody of acting unethically, but ask questions like, so let's play devil's advocate. How could somebody abuse this system? Are we sure this system isn't something that could be twisted and used maliciously against our users, or against the company, or against me? Like, I think that's where, particularly as a woman or a person of color, you bring a lot of value to the table, asking questions that other people might not be asking because they don't possess the perspective you possess. I would think that having you on the team would mean that I value that perspective, and I want somebody to ask that question if the opportunity arises. So I would hope that you're in an organization that brought you on and says, wow, you know what, we need somebody who has an outside perspective on this that we do not share. Hopefully they will bring it to the table. I would hope that in those instances they're counting on you to bring up those questions, especially when you're new to a team. Because, I'm hiring you to bring your expertise and your experience to the table. I don't want you to hide that. And sometimes those conversations are going to be rough. Sometimes those conversations are going to be like, man, oh God, I don't want to have this conversation today. But as a designer, it's the conversation that we have to have. Does that help at all? Does that lay some framework? I definitely. Also, would it be easily recognizable? I think that's a good question. The easily recognizable ones, that is where there's some pretty clear-cut things that you shouldn't do. You shouldn't deny service to a group of people based on their gender, their race, things like that. Those are always like, oh my God, so clear. But let's take it back to surge pricing. Surge pricing, when we have more demand than we have drivers, we raise the price. Is there any way that this can be gamed? And then you begin spitballing with your team. I think the question to ask should be broad. Is there any way that this can be abused? And then in your group, actually, there's another way to do this, and I think that this actually may be the easier way to begin sussing out different perspectives. When you get into that conversation about how could this be abused, instead of saying out loud, "Hey everybody, how could this be abused?" Say, "I want to run an experiment. I want us all to everybody get a Post-it. All right, we're designers. We love Post-its, right? So everybody get a Post-it. And I want you to write down the one way that this is most likely to be abused. And then we're going to go around the room. All right? When we go around the room and everybody's had to write down what they had, it's far more likely that they're going to have different concerns from one another than if we discuss it out in a group. When you discuss it out in a group, like after the first person goes, everybody gloms to that idea. Yeah, that's the same one I had. Like avoid the open discussion thing. If you have a situation where you're trying to get different ideas, always go with, all right, everybody, write it down, and then let's discuss. You know, often a lot of times you'll write it down, you'll go post it on the wall, and then whoever's the admin for the meeting will go up to the wall and they'll read out all the concerns, and then suddenly, instead of like having one concern or two concerns, we've stretched it into the realm of 4 or 5 concerns, and then we begin really identifying the different breakpoints that we have to deal with. Got a couple more here. It says, yeah, because what if I'm the only one in the room? And you mean person of color. And I got to be honest with you, the way tech works, you likely will be. And that's a shortfall of the tech community overall. But if you're a woman, if you're a person of color, if you are of a non-binary gender, I guarantee that you're probably going to be the only person, and you may be a combination, like Felicia, a person of color, a woman who is also a person of color. You know, now you're carrying the weight of 2 minorities at the same time, and really, gender shouldn't be a minority, but it is in a tech organization. I think that's where I would hope that other people in that room are allies. I try to be an ally, but I can't be in every freaking room. But I definitely want to state that you want to identify allies, and then try to go into hate using war terms. So you want to go into the discussion. I'm not going to say battle. This is a damn discussion. Nobody's drawing swords. It could be abused by charging. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's something that is something that should be brought up. You know, I can identify. I need to make sure that this system doesn't identify person of color and then immediately kick into surge pricing, or doesn't identify a certain neighborhood and then immediately kick into surge pricing. I think that those are the things that we're trying to. Those are the things that we're trying to elevate in the discussion, and that's something that, you know, I'm a white guy. Am I gonna bring that up? Probably not, because I'd never think about it. All right, that's where diversity on teams really comes through as a giant win. And frankly, people get sued over that. People get sued over discriminatory pricing all the time. If I don't have somebody that's from a minority on those teams, I'm immediately opening myself up to possible legal litigation. So I need you to talk. I need you to weigh in those conversations. Your perspective is hugely valuable. You could save me millions of dollars in legal fees and lawsuits. Okay? So if anybody's like, oh my gosh, I don't know why they should listen to me, because it could cost the company millions of dollars. That's why they should listen to you. So if there are no other questions, I want to genuinely, 100% heartfelt thank you for attending. Thank you for asking questions. Felicia especially, thank you for asking so many great questions this morning. Subscribe, like, watch, interact, grow, newpragmatic.com. There's the Slack channel. There's courses opening up June 1st. There's the YouTube channel. I want you to jump in, interact, hit me up on Twitter, see me over on Facebook, say hi on LinkedIn. I'm everywhere. I'm here primarily for you. All right? I want to make design education more accessible. And conversations like this are conversations that we need to be having more of. And that's one reason why I wanted to open this up and make sure that everybody could participate. So, newpragmatic.com. Be sure to sign up. You can sign up for access and join the Slack channel right there. Apply for access. And otherwise, thank you. I appreciate your time this morning, and we'll talk again soon. Next week, observation and research practices. We'll talk then. See ya.